Hey everyone, Karnak here, Star Wars Armada Explained. Today we're going to look at the title for Imperial Star Destroyer, the Avenger title. This was a request from one of my viewers. He was like, I don't understand Avenger, I don't understand how it works. Can you explain it for me? Absolutely I can. So, for Avenger, how do you know it equips to an Imperial-class Star Destroyer? Well, besides the fact that there is a very large ISD on the picture of the card, if you look at the bottom left-hand corner of the card, you'll see a picture of the Star Destroyer there. It is faction specific for Empire only, which you can see there next to its point cost, which is 5. Now, Avenger, if you look there next to its name, you'll see a little dot or bullet point, signifies this title is unique. You can only bring one of them in your fleet. Now, this title is one of the few things that have been hard errataed in Star Wars Armada where the card text has been changed. I'm going to read the original text of the card. So the original text of the card was, while attacking, the defender cannot spend exhausted defense tokens. Meaning for 5 points, if you attacked any ship or squadron, because it doesn't specify, it just says, while attacking, the defender cannot spend exhausted defense tokens. So it made Avenger for 5 points very powerful, and FFG, they did release a hard errata for it. It says, this upgrade card's effect should read, while attacking, you may exhaust this card. If you do, the defender cannot spend exhausted defense tokens during this attack. So they hard errated. They said, you know what, we realize that for 5 points, it's a very powerful title. Now it's an exhaust ability. You can only use it for one attack, period, and only on one target. What do I mean by that? Well, let's go into some of the tie-ins and effects, because Avenger used to be really good against attacking squadrons, and it still can be good against attacking squadrons. It just depends. So I'm going to go over the new wording now, and I'll also make sure I'm touching on any other like little interesting nuances and facts. So for this ISD, we're going to say it's an ISD 2 version. And we're going to say it's shooting, from its front arc, it has the 4 reds and four blues. For the anti-squadron, it throws the 2 blue die. Now, how does Avenger work? Let's walk through it. So, we're going to say that this MC-75, maybe he's already been shot at by a couple of other targets, and he's exhausted some defense tokens. Now, Avenger is activating, and now he's going to shoot this MC-75. So remember, the first thing that you do is make sure that you actually have line of sight to the target, the whole zone that you want to shoot. In this case, we want to shoot from front to front. Make sure that we're in the appropriate range bands for the dice that we are using, which, again, remember, red dice are only used at long range, blue dice and red dice can be used at blue range, and all 3 colors of dice, blue, black, and red, can be used at close range. So we see here we're at close range. There's no obstacles or any other obstruction in between our ships, so we do have clear line of sight, and we are not obstructed. And again, we're making sure we're measuring that range from cardboard to cardboard, not from plastic to plastic. So we then re-roll our initial attack pool. Draw that line of sight there. We're shooting front to front. We throw the 4 reds and the 4 blues. Now, we do any other die modification we need to do, any re-rolls, if we need to add any die, etc., any other upgrade cards. But for all intents and purposes, we're going to say, we're sticking with this die roll. Now, most ships, obviously, if they've got redirect or braces or contains or something like that, I only rolled 1 accuracy. So this MC-75, maybe he's got ECM. It doesn't matter what token essentially I try to lock, he can just unlock with ECM. Now, Avenger comes into effect where you can exhaust Avenger, and the defender cannot spend exhausted defense tokens, period. You don't need to worry about generating accuracies to lock those tokens to prevent him from use. The fact that you have Avenger alone, the wording on the card means the defender cannot spend defense tokens, period, at all. Cannot spend defense tokens to gain their effect. Obviously, if the token is green, even if you accuracy it, if they've got electronic countermeasures, they can still use a token normally if it's green. Again, if they're used, they're on the red or orange sign, depending on orange side, depending on how you see the color. Again, exhausted tokens cannot be spent. Period. All right. I think we've managed to cover that. So in this case, this MC75 may be able to brace the attack, but he's not able to redirect. He can't spend his spent contain. He has another contain he could use on this attack. But essentially, we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So 7 damage brace the 4 would strip all the shields off the front of this MC75. A lot of people like to use Avenger in conjunction with activating Squadrons, especially if they're using an ISD-2. You throw the 4 Squadrons into the whole zone of whatever it is you're trying to shoot, and try to see if they'll spend defensive tokens that you can then negate out with Avenger. But in a nutshell, that's how Avenger works. Now, Avenger does also work on a Squadron. So when you're attacking Squadrons, for example, we'll say Dutch Vander had spent both of his defense tokens already, taking some damage, and we'll say he's down to 2 health, and if you throw 2 blue die, and we'll say that both of these ended up being hits, and if you have not used Avenger on another shot, you can tap it for 1 squadron. 1 squadron, period. Because remember, it's only for this attack, it's an exhaust. You can only use it on 1 target. There's no multiple targeting anymore like how it was with the old card. So you could say, hey Dutch, I don't want you to use your defense tokens. You can't use the defense tokens. I'm dealing 2 damage to you, and you're going to die. Now, if he's being supported by a squadron like Jan Ors can spend her defensive tokens even if her defensive tokens are already exhausted. Because remember, you're targeting Dutch with your attack and your abilities. It's not stopping Jan Ors. Her special ability is with any squadron at range 2, she can use one of her defensive tokens for any squadron. So Avenger doesn't stop Jan if Jan is going to spend to defend someone else. But obviously if that Star Destroyer is shooting at Jan and her tokens are exhausted, she can't use her own tokens to, otherwise. It's like a normal squadron. Because that should just make sense. So pretty much Jan can help any other squadron, but she can't help herself, if she's being targeted by Avenger. All right, I think I've touched on that enough. I think you guys understand. So let's go into some other nuances and some other things. Oh, another thing real quick I want to touch about with Squadrons. A lot of people against Imperial Squadrons, they'll throw a fighter at like a TIE fighter, like Howl Runner, who's got a scatter, with maybe with a black die attack fighter who's throwing maybe 3 or 4 black die. Force them to spend the scatter, and then you hit them with Avenger, and then you tap Avenger to put some damage into them so they can't scatter that. Now, depending on circumstance, that may not be the best use of Avenger, because remember that TIE fighter still may have brace. But if you can get them to use a scatter and have already used brace on something else, all you need is 1 damage in there or 2 damage, and they can't brace or scatter it. I want to make sure again I'm touching on that. So sometimes using Avenger on a squadron is a good call, especially if it's a very annoying squadron that is difficult to kill or is a heavy bomber and you need to take them out. Alright, I think I've said enough on that. I think we can all see how very powerful Avenger is, especially if your opponent has used brace. Well, an intelligent opponent, obviously if they know Avenger wants to shoot their ship, is not going to use their brace. How else can you make that happen to where you spend their brace for them? Well, there's a nifty Imperial commander called Admiral Sloane. Her special ability is if a non-rogue squadron that can throw blue die attacks an enemy ship or squadron, if they roll an accuracy result, they can decide to spend a defense token for that ship or squadron. So a lot of Sloane players love using Avenger because they can fly up, they can tap. Most ships only have like a single brace or a single redirect, and you fly up and you tap that defense token. Now Avenger can blast away at that ship with no fear. It doesn't need to worry about rolling accuracy results when you can not have them use their brace and you can just roll pure damage and just blow through whatever's in front of you. So a lot of players will use Sloane with Avenger. A lot of players will also use boarding troopers. So boarding troopers, again, when you reveal them and you're at close range, you can spend defense tokens up to the squadron total of your ship. So like an ISD-2 would be able to spend 4 tokens. Now he can't choose the same token twice. So if a ship only has, for example, 2 or 3 defensive tokens, even though he can spend up to 4, he cannot target the same token again. You can't double spend something in one go. However, if a defense token has already been spent and it's on its exhausted side, boarding troopers can spend the exhausted token and force your opponent to discard it. Okay, there is a difference between spend and exhaust. Exhaust means you can turn a defense token from its readied state, the green side, to the red or orange side. But if it's already on red or orange, even if it says exhaust, well, it's already exhausted. You can't exhaust it again and get rid of it. But boarding troopers does specifically say you spend defense tokens. So great combination again there with ISDs. Some players, I can't count how many times I've seen new players on the Armada Discord be like, "Oh man, I love using overload pulse with Avenger." Not understanding the timing of this card. There's a lot of confusion, so let me clear it up. So remember, when you roll your initial attack pool, and then you get into the modify die step after that, a lot of players make the mistake of thinking, oh, I see a blue critical is what I need to trigger Overload Pulse, which is you can exhaust all the defender's defense tokens, which, again, if they flip from green to red, well, now I can follow up with Avenger, right? Well, no. Because the trigger effect is not until the resolve damage step for criticals. Meaning that Overload Pulse doesn't trigger until after the defender has already declared his use of whatever tokens he wants in the spend defense token step. Okay, so even though you roll the blue critical and you're going to trigger this ability, Avenger only works for defense tokens that are exhausted. Overload Pulse doesn't exhaust defense tokens until the resolve damage step. You kind of see the chain of events here. Overload Pulse doesn't come before Avenger. Avenger comes before Overload Pulse. Okay, that's the order of events. Now, obviously, if you have a different ship shoot the ship that you want to shoot at with Overload Pulse and exhaust all the tokens, then you can hit them with Avenger. But that is kind of a 1-2 tap that is very predictable and very difficult to set up. So I want to make sure, again, I was explaining all that, showing some interactions and nuances with Avenger. One more thing I do want to touch on. What about Admonition? So Admonition says, while defending, during the spend defense token step, you may discard a defense token to cancel an attack die. Admonition still works. So Avenger only stops the defender from spending a defense token to gain its regular result. Admonition is an upgrade card that allows the defender to just completely discard a token to cancel one attack die. He's not spending a token, he's outright discarding it. Again, it comes down to the wording. So Avenger does not stop Admonition from discarding exhausted defense tokens to utilize his effect, or that effect. And that is pretty much Avenger. I feel like I've touched on enough points that you feel like you guys can kind of grasp what Avenger can and cannot do. So just remember, it can only be used on one attack, one target. It's then exhausted after that. And it allows you to make sure your opponent doesn't spend any exhausted defense tokens. Okay, I think we've covered it. As far as I'm aware, there are no other crazy interactions or nuances or anything else. But as always, if you feel like I missed anything or if I got anything in error, please be sure to point it out to me. Let me know. I do read my comments. Always strive to make sure I'm presenting the best information to all of you. I appreciate you guys watching, and like always, I'll see you guys next time.